Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Today we have our third aircraft devblog. We had the P-40F, we had the F-4U-7, and now we have a premium Romanian plane which is going to be in the Italian trajectory. This is the I.A.R 81C. It is one of the final variants of the I.A.R 80 series, and the main difference between a lot of them is pretty much the armaments that they had, or the designated roles that they were supposed to be used in. So the 81C is actually a user-made aircraft. This was made by Vitaly Vostokov, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, and he's also known as Nova or Nov A29R, depending on how you want to say it, but there is an actual link to his War Thunder Live, and it seems like he's working on another aircraft, which is always nice to see. This one is the Kriegsmarine AR196A3, so maybe we're going to see that in game soon. But anyway, yeah, go give this guy some love if you want, and just say thank you for the I.A.R. It is obviously through the revenue share program. If you don't know about the revenue share program, it is definitely something that if you are a modeler, that you want to get involved in and have a look in. There is an actual decent amount of money that you can actually make. So you can actually, a fixed fee of 6,000 to 10,000 USD for 3D models, which is impressive. And a fixed fee for cockpits, 1,500 to 8,000, depending on how detailed it is, I'm sure, and also the going rates. So yeah, it's something that can be quite lucrative for you if you are a person who really likes this modeling, and just shows that modeling is a decent profession to go into, but also takes a hell of a lot of time. So the first thing is to obviously look at what Gaijin thinks about the aircraft. It's a rank 2 premium, 220mm, two 7.62s, and the model is also made by the player, which we talked about before. So, as I said, this is a Romanian aircraft which is going in the Italian trajectory. Now, from the comments below, because I was wondering myself, why is this going in the Italian trajectory? And it pretty much seems that the reason why it's getting put there is because it's an Axis nation, and also because the Italians have less premiums than the Germans. So putting it in the German tree would mean that people would complain about the Italian tree, so that's why they're putting it there. And if you're okay with that, then alright. For me personally, I would rather see it in a German tree capacity, just because it was used. It was used by the Romanians, but it has much more ties to Germany than it does Italy, when we have all things considered. The guns itself, two 7.62s and two 20mm, both German guns. The 20mm, since it's a rank 2, you may think they're MGFFs that you see on something like a BF-109 E3. But no, this thing sports MG15120s, which are very prominent on stuff like the Italian aircraft, and also some of the later tier German aircraft in the form of the Focke-Wulfs and also the BF-109s. So at rank 2, having these guns, that's pretty powerful, to be quite honest, and nice to see. But overall, as I said, the 81C was created to be upgunned with these 20mm before the end of the war, which, you know, is good for the Romanians. The thing about the I.A.R series of planes, the 80s and also the 81s, there's actually a lot of different modifications out there. Some were designed in a fighter capacity, some in a fighter bomber, some in a dive bomber capacity, and mainly the differences between them are incredibly minor. So even though we have a premium vehicle here, we now have the model that we can jerry-rig to be able to cover other aircraft which are very similar to it. This basically means that we could see other variants of this machine in the game pretty soon, which would be very nice. On top of this, if we just look at the aircraft itself, there is a nice history section there. and I would say read it, since not a lot of people are actually going to be familiar with this aircraft. I personally knew a little bit about it, just because I'd heard about the user model being created, so I had a look at some history of it a while ago, but generally there's still a lot of information there, which is, kind of up in the air. So we're going to go through this Devblog. In War Thunder, the I.A.R. 81C will be making its way to the game as the first Rank 2 premium aircraft available for the Italian aviation tree. As such, players can expect a fairly quick and nimble fighter, equipped with more than adequate firepower, capable of dealing with most threats with relative ease. The first striking feature of the I.A.R. 81C that pilots may notice is its stretched fuselage, housing an unusually rearward positioned cockpit. Although this unusual placement meant that pilots experienced some difficulties when taking off and landing the I.A.R. 81C, the bubble-shaped cockpit canopy, wow, that's a little bit jumbled up, allowed for great rearward visibility, which will surely be appreciated by the fans of simulator modes in War Thunder as well. They always bring up the cockpit as the only when simulator players get mentioned in devblogs, because they talk about the cockpit, which is kind of funny. What would be nice, actually, since they mentioned it, it would actually be nice to get a picture of the inside of the cockpit, but a man can dream. So overall, what you're getting, they call it a fairly quick and nimble fighter. This thing has an over 1,000 horsepower engine, but one of the things that it struggles with is its weight. Now, it has two MG15120s, two 7.62s, as talked about before. Are they 6.2s? Yes, 6.2s. I was thinking 8.2 for some reason, but we'll go with 6.2. It is also all metal. So that's going to add a bit of weight to this big bird, and also with the elongated fuselage, we're talking about a heavy machine here. So when they talk about it being quick and nimble, for me, the maneuverability of this aircraft is not going to be as good as some of its Italian compatriots, which it'll be going up against in the Italian tech tree. When you compare it to a Spitfire, it definitely won't, which is something they also compare it to. And against the BF-109, I can see the BF-109 outturning it as well, as long as we're talking about the Rank 2 BF-109s, the F1s, F2s, the E3s, stuff like that, which have a hell of a lot of their maneuverability before they get heavier as they go along. But for me personally, looking at the general shape and size of this machine, looking at the gnome Rhone that it sports, what I see is much more of a high-altitude energy fighter than anything else. I don't see this being similar to something like a C-202 or 205, which are very much jack-of-all-trades, where they have good rates of climb. They have good guns on them, especially the C-202 EC or the 205 EC. I can't remember which one it is. But basically the 220s and then the 212s or the 27s, very similar to what this machine has. But yeah, it has the firepower, it has the first turn, it has basically everything apart from good energy retention. And if you're at the tier of rank 2, you don't really have to worry about energy retention unless you go up against another player who knows what he's doing. And therefore what you have to do is wait until you're the last guy to dive, and then make sure that you make it count by mopping up the enemy. If that's where the I.A.R. 81C is going to fit as well alongside those aircraft, I don't see if it's going to be better than the 202s and the 205s, but it'll definitely be comparable, especially at high altitude. Once we go lower though, and once we start losing a bit of speed, this thing to me seems like it's going to be a brick. Very much similar to the early Focke-Wulfs when they get in that state as well, apart from without the roll rates. But as I said, we're going to have to see. I've never really looked at any historical data on this machine. I'm pretty much just going on some research, and also, the way that the plane looks and works, what it's made out of, what its engine capacity is, and comparing it to other machines like that in War Thunder, and also its fighter-bomber state. The reason why designers chose to stretch out the aircraft, though, was to preserve the ideal center of gravity on the heavier production aircraft in order to maintain the excellent controllability of machine praised by many pilots. In addition, the excellent agility, the I.A.R 81C, doesn't disappoint when it comes to speed either. Powered by a 1025 horsepower license-built version of the GNOME Roan Mistral Major engine, the I.A.R 81C is able to reach a speed of 485 kilometers an hour at an altitude of 5,000 meters, which, I mean, it doesn't seem that fast, but they're comparing it to very early versions of Spitfires and BF-109, so that's kind of the BR we're going to look at, 2327, something like that. Despite certain machines, such as earlier versions of the Spitfire and the BF-109, exceeding the performance of the I.A.R 81C, the aircraft will still be able to hold its own in a dogfight and make up for some of the lacking performance with its firepower. Now, whenever somebody says that statement, I remember the Focke-Wulf 190A8. The Focke-Wulf 190A8 has as much firepower as you want. It has a ridiculous burst mass if you look at it per second. You know what you can never do though? Get your guns on target. And this is something which is an issue with a lot of aircraft which have good weaponry. They're so heavy they can't get around. Now they're comparing it to Spitfires here. Comparing it to Spitfires I'm not sure is the best idea, but at least it will be a counter-style matchup. I can't see this thing being a turn fighter. I understand that they talk about it not being able to reach that great of a speed at 5,000 meters, but there's no way for me this is a turn fighter. It's all metal, it's going to be heavy as hell, it's got a really powerful engine, it's got good guns, but they're also heavy for its tier, so I just can't see it. So comparing it to a Spitfire, as I said, stylistic matchup, whereas the BF-109, maybe it's slightly different. I would actually compare this much more to one of the early Focke-Wulfs, maybe the A1 instead of something like that, just a worse version of the A1. It's also interesting that it has the GNOME Roan engine though. If you look into the I.R 80s, which maybe we'll get one day, some of them are actually produced by the French under contract, so therefore it'll be interesting to see if we have competing I.A.R machines in different nations, which might be funny. But yeah, by the way, for update 1.79, we decided to locate the new aircraft of Axis nations that are not represented as a main game nation in War Thunder in the research lineup for Italy. So, that is interesting. Now, the reason why this is interesting, if you paid attention to the tabs above, I'm just going to make sure I haven't become Mr. Ice. Hell yeah, we're good stuff, right. Let's talk about the fact of that statement. So whenever we hear a new aircraft from an Axis nation, whether it be Romania, whether it be Finland, whether it be, Hungary, whether it be maybe Spain, even though they were kind of indifferent during the war, they were still on the side of the Germans, we'll say. They've said that the new aircraft are gonna go into the lineup for Italy. Now, the obvious reason for this is because 1 million people and all of their mothers as well have been asking for more Italian aircraft. Now, if you can't provide said Italian aircraft, or maybe they're just taking a little bit more time, what you do is you give them other nations' aircraft in the form of Romanians, Hungarians, Spanish, and all of the like that you can get away with. So, that seems to be what's going on here. Instead of having, just Italian aircraft in the Italian tree, you're going to get a bunch of other ones, either in the form of premiums and standard tech tree ones. Now, this slightly disappoints me, but because we're looking at this aircraft, the I.A.R 81C, that doesn't mean that it's taken away development time from other Italian aircraft because it's a user-made one. Now, if they start cranking out a lot of either captured vehicles or a lot of minor nation vehicles which are made by, the War Thunder staff, and they start cranking them out for the Italian tree, then I'll be kind of annoyed because it means that they probably haven't been working on the Reggiani series of aircraft, which is the one that I'm personally looking forward to when it comes to Italy. We already have the first one in game. They've already created it. It's new row or column. I believe it's a column in this. No, I believe it's a row in this case. So it would be nice to see other Reggianis after it. So I hope they're working on them. Instead, what we're going to get, or at least for the time being, is some Romanian aircraft. Now, where this comes interesting is speculation. So they have said this is just for new aircraft of the Axis nations. And with that said, the Axis nations in the game right now, basically meaning Japan, Italy, and Germany. Germany already has a Romanian premium, by the way, in the form of the duck. Go and look at the duck and see what it actually says. Or at least the premium duck, I should say. So where this gets interesting is they say for aircraft. Now, let's expand that. One of the issues that Gaijin have been having, which has been well documented and also, talked about by themselves, is the fact that Italy has a few issues with their ground lineups. And the main reason for this is, they lost quite early on in the war, and therefore you have quite this large gap in rank 3 and 4, and you have a choice of either filling it full of American tanks again, which the French tree already has a few, and the Japanese tree already has a few. So you might be asking players to play American tanks once again for another ground forces tree, or what could happen is they're able to find another nation in the form of Germany or somebody else. Now this could be in the form of minor nations. As I said before, Hungary and Czechoslovakia had some very interesting ideas when it came to... Is Hungary the right one? Was Hungary even formed by then? I'm sorry I have to check this, but no, Hungary was formed. I don't want to make a tit of myself, yeah. Alright, sorry. But yeah, you have Czechoslovakia, you have Hungary, you have Romania, you have all of these nations that you could throw at the Italian tech tree, and that might be what they do. And I would be fine with them doing that, because there's some really interesting tanks there, but I'd prefer if it was named as a minor axis tree. But I know they won't do that, because it would annoy the Italian player base. But because of that, let's have a look at some Romanian tanks they could throw in to the Italian tree if they felt like it. So we have the Renault FT, of course. Every nation pretty much used them, at least in Europe. Yeah, and then you have the R1 AHIVR, which is a little bit of a tankette. I mean, it only has machine guns on it, so it would be in the same league as the M2A2. Then you've got what looks like very much a Panzer 35T, and this is the Skoda LT VZ35s, which are very similar, as I said, to the German version. That would be nice to see. Then you have the Renault R35s, we already have them in game, and then we're getting a little bit interesting. So this is the R35 with the 45mm from the Russians. I don't know how small Romanian people are. How the hell do you fit a guy in that turret with a breech that big and a turret that small? I'm not going to speculate on how he did it, but I feel like it would have been kind of cramped for him. But yeah, there you go, an R35 armed with a 45mm. I mean, why not? Then you got the T-38, which once again is the Panzer 38T from the German line, but it would be nice to see something like that, so you could put it in the Italians. And then you have, of course, the Panzer III Aus N, which we do have as a premium. Yes, we do have it as a premium for the Germans. It's either the N or the M. I'm pretty sure it's the N, though, which is a short barreled 75 version of the Panzer III chassis, and that could be put straight into the Italian tree from the Romanian side. Then you got some Panzer IVs, there was 11 of them delivered to Romania, which is always nice. Then you got the Stugs. The Stugs would be fun as well, Stug 3 Aus Gs. No Stug 4s though. Italy could be the first nation with Stug 4s. And then we also have some interesting ones. So this is the Takam T60. They took a T60 chassis and decided that they wanted to put a big gun on it. So that's exactly what they did. It also used slightly different armor and also a slightly different engine. But the Takam T60 is one of those machines which just looks very odd, as you can see here. And one of the main factors of it is, as you can see, it has a 76mm on it. So in true wartime fashion, take a small chassis, take off the turret, give it a very weak superstructure, and smash a massive gun on it, and when you fire it, watch it rock. That's basically what a lot of people did. I mean, we already have examples of this in game. Some of the lower tier Russian or Soviet tank destroyers are the same. This would be the same, so yeah, it would be a little bit of fun at the time. Then we have the Takam R2. As you can see, it is not exactly the most beautiful beast in the world, but it's a 76mm ZIS-3 artillery piece, once again on this is on the Panzer 35 chassis, so not the T-60. So some retrofitted machines, which I think would be really cool to have in the Italian tree. I will go into the Czechoslovakian tanks because they're probably the most interesting when we talk about putting it into the Italian tree, but let's get back to this aircraft, what we're supposed to be talking about. One of its main ideas behind it is this idea of a fighter bomber. Now, because of its all-metal structure, this means that it will be able to survive quite a lot of enemy fire from the ground, but the issue is it will be slow coming in, and hopefully with some kind of comparable dive speed to its weight, hopefully that is sorted out. But you've still got to be careful with stuff like this, because if it is all metal, if it is heavy, a lot of the time its dive speed, especially at low tiers, isn't going to be the best, so you're just going to end up running out of energy incredibly quickly. This might be a very, very early energy fighter for a lot of people, and therefore not the easiest premium to pick up, but once mastered will set you up for the vehicles of rank 4, which that type of playstyle is heavily dominant. What I'm talking about here is the Tempest Mark IIs of the world, the D13s, D12s, D9s of the German tree. If we look at the Americans, I mean the Americans with the P-47, the P-38 and the P-51 all can use this style to great effect, so this might be a decent training aircraft for those people who want to learn how to energy fight but don't want to do it at rank 4 and they want to actually, get used to it. So yeah, the I.A.R. 81C can mount a single 225 kilo bomb underneath the fuselage in order to engage armored ground targets such as tanks and fortifications. What is interesting though is also, however, suspended ordnance creates extra drag and additionally weighs the aircraft down, decreasing its performance as a result. I mean, it's obvious, isn't it? Extra weight, worse aerodynamics. It's going to make your aircraft not perform as you may think it should. This is also worth keeping in mind when flying a machine that can act as both a fighter and a bomber. Getting caught at the wrong time in the wrong place with the ordnance still attached to the aircraft can sometimes be the final nail in the coffin for some pilots. So my general rule when we talk about this, being a realistic pilot, in air realistic, if you have a fighter/bomber aircraft, if it's completely useless in the fighter role, so something like a Focke-Wulf 190A8, it is much better to use it as a ground attacker, but to wait 5 minutes for the initial battle to start. Once it's started, then you go in for the ground pound. For an aircraft like this, it's really going to depend on if it is actually viable as a fighter. What we find with a lot of fighter bombers is that they err on the side of the bombers and are just not very good at staying alive in the air and do not have good flight characteristics which back it up. But there are other planes out there, such as the P-47, the P-51, which have great ground-pounding capabilities, which can survive for a long time against the enemies that it fights against. So, in my opinion, it all depends on its flight performance, but it doesn't look great from a flight performance point of view, especially when we talk about rank 2, which is heavily dominated by a little bit of boom and zoom, but mainly turn fighting, especially when we look at the Soviets and the British, which are going to be the majority of this plane's fodder for it. Now, we have some pictures of it. When it talks about a single 225, you can see where the mount's supposed to be. It's even present when there's no bombs on it, and also here as well. So I'm wondering if it will lose its bomb racks if you don't carry bombs. If it doesn't, that is extra drag on the airframe, which will definitely not help you out in the long run, but at least you still have those good guns. Even though it was talking about that it has a single 225 kilogram bomb, every picture that they show has 3 bombs on it, and these bombs don't look like they have any, like, any characteristics on them, especially when we compare it to the central bomb. The central bomb itself as well does not look like a 225. This looks like at least a 500. So I'm not exactly sure, unless they're of comparable size. It just seems a little bit odd to me. These do not look like 225s either. These look like 100s or something like that. So for me, if I look at this, what I think of is a 1500 and 2 100s, but what it says on the Devblog is that it takes a 1225, so I'm not exactly sure. Using it in a dive bombing capacity will still be useful in ground forces. That is something that you do have to think about in the future. Even though Italy doesn't have ground forces right now, it will do in the future. So putting this plane in the Italian tree may help out the issues that Italians will have in the ground forcing role. What you've got to remember is the Italian tech tree is very fighter focused, and on top of that you have a few heavy bombers which are not going to be suited to ground forces. So more of these attacker style aircraft that we get means that the Italian ground forces will be able to be supported from the air in a fighter bomber role, which is nice to see since every other nation is dominant at it at specific BRs. But anyway, this is the I.A.R 81C. If you want any more information, please go look it up. It is an interesting aircraft, and I do believe the minor nations should be represented in War Thunder. So to see another Romanian aircraft put in is wonderful. Hopefully we see some other nations as well moving forward. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time.